Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special board meeting, legal policy meeting this Wednesday of February the 26th, 2025. We'll start. Any question on the minutes from last meeting? Any questions on the minutes from last meeting? Nothing on meeting minutes, so we will turn it over to Ms. Carter.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's having a fantastic Wednesday. We're going to first start off with number 2. We have public participation. If there's any. Did you already do that?
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I don't think we have any. 3, discussion topics. Today we're going to do a first read for special education. I'm going to have Ms. Freimeyer come up. This is just a small change with a current policy that we needed to make as it relates to the naming of the Department of Education. It went from ODE to Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. So Melissa's just going to do a brief overview about what this policy is and the minor changes made.
So the Department of Education has updated their operating standards for educating children with disabilities. So whenever they go through that, I have a copy of it here if you want to look at it. It just goes through and is going through summary of changes that they're making. It's not going to change our policy or anything that we currently have other than renaming the Department of Education to Department of Education and Workforce. Some of the things that they are changing, though, is they're removing the word mental retardation from some of the language embedded in the operating standards because it's an archaic, outdated word. Then the other thing that they're doing is Ohio has finally adopted the developmental delay identification category outside of preschool. So now it can go through the age of 9. So that's just some of the things that they are changing within that. Other than that, everything is how we have been operating here in the district and following policy within the operating standards. There is, through the Department of Education, we do have to upload the change to the policy and the acceptance of following the Department of Education's operating standards for children with disabilities.
Excellent. Any questions for Ms. Freimeyer?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our attendance policy. I'm going to have Dr. Lash come up, and this is a first read for the attendance policy.
Changes. I would just provide access.
Good evening. Some of the changes here to the board policy 5200 attendance were around just clarifying some of the language. Oh, I thought this was showing there. Okay. Okay, so I think if you look at page 2 in the section that says excessive absences, join up there. Okay, so we added some clarifying language there just to ensure that the messaging around House Bill 410 with excessive absences and the total number of absences in the month versus over the course of the year, as well as medically excused absences and the number of call-offs versus doctored notes, that kind of thing, that there was clarity around there. And additionally, with the religious expression days, ensuring that that language was clear to represent what you'll see in another policy that speaks to religious education time.
Okay. Any questions about the attendance policy? Because then she's going to move into talking about release time for religious instruction. Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, no. I'm looking at, I think I'm going to wait to see. Yeah, I'm gonna wait to see. She may elaborate it when we get into the religious exception, like the parents who allow their kids to go. I'm thinking with Lifeway, or is that what we're about to be talking about? Okay,
Yes.
so I can wait till we get there.
Yes. And I don't have, may I see a copy of that? I don't see that one opened up on here. Thank you. Okay, so for the next policy, 5223, release time for religious instruction. If you recall with the, I'm going to look to Attorney Kepchar, House Bill 8 with the analysis. Do I have it named right?
Yes.
Thank you. As it spoke to release time for religious instruction, we actually already had a policy in existence. And so we already had it. We didn't have to create a new policy, but what we did want to ensure is that in our policy that we added the information in there about the sponsoring entity. So when you look at release time for religious instruction, letters A, B, C, D, E, you'll see what we added there was letter B, that the sponsoring entity collaborates with the school district to identify a time for the course to be offered during the school day. That language comes directly from House Bill 8. And then we also added 1, 2, 3, 4 in the fourth paragraph, if you will, that starts with the district may require a sponsoring entity's instructors and volunteers to undergo criminal records checks in a manner determined by the district. We don't have to, we can. And so we wanted to ensure that there was language in there that represented that said we may require. Because it's the entity's responsibility. We work in collaboration with the entity on the time for that religious instruction. But we wanted to cover that with may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, that's what I wanted clarity, because the may require, but if it's required, however, the entity is responsible for paying for the background check for whoever is facilitating their person is facilitating the religious instruction or whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I do think that that's important, especially because we talked about previously about people coming to our buildings, volunteering, taking students on trips and who interact with our students. So I think regardless of what the organization is, that if they're interfacing with our students and if they're able to come into our buildings, that we know they're cleared to, based off of what is required for people who work with children, that they're cleared to do just that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it should be the entity's responsibility to make sure,
To ensure.
that and be able to prove, to send proof that that's been done, just like we would,
Right.
So that is either in ODE where we can check that they're fine to have a non-tax certification, because in a sense they're with kids and we know their background stuff is clear to work with kids if they get a non-tax certification. Mm-hmm. Something along those lines, just for safety reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question by Reverend Harrison.
I'll wait till she gets
Okay, got it.
habitually truant.
Go ahead. He's going to wait till you get to the part where it says habitually truant.
Oh, well, okay, then let's go back to 5200. Okay, Member Harrison, what's your question?
Okay, yeah, habitually truant. First, how many hours are in a school day? How many hours do that account for?
So it varies depending on the day, elementary to middle to high. It could be anywhere from 5 1/4 of a day to 6 hours in a school day. It really depends. And
Okay, so
Angela, if you have
No, you're
the
right.
specific hours.
yeah, so I'm trying to calculate hours into what I'm looking here.
I know, and that's where we oftentimes will say, when we judge things, we judge them typically on a 6-hour day.
Okay.
And so we'll say, for instance, when you look at the habitually truant, the 30 consecutive hours, we'll typically say that's about 5 consecutive days.
Okay.
Give or take, depending on what your actual day is.
Okay.
And with the new House, well, it's not new anymore, but House Bill 410, even tardies can actually end up
Calculating.
being equivalent to a day if you end up accumulating that much time.
So here's my question, and I asked it last year about, and this is a general scenario. I'm kicked off the bus, but I'm not suspended from school. But my school, I need to take the bus to get to school. So that kind of puts us in a situation where we're increasing the likelihood that we're going to have attendance issue. And just to say, how do we mitigate that? Because it's almost like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And we can't have them acting out on the bus. We have to address that. But we also have to address the attendance, and we also have to address the education, because if they're not in school, we're not educating them. So that's kind of how do we mitigate that?
Pastor Harrison, so I charged Dr. Lash, while they are working on the new handbook, updating it, that they would be working on that as well.
Okay.
Because that information would need to be included in the new handbook. So the committee is still working on that. I didn't forget or ignore it, but it's something we've actually been kind of throwing around in discussion, because it has a little bit of a nuance to it, because you're not suspended from the bus.
You mean from
school, but you are suspended from the bus.
Yeah.
And if you already can't get to school other than the bus, now you have to stay home, and now you're absent. And that is an unexcused absence, because
That is correct.
I don't mean to say it that way, but you would have elected to stay at home, and the child really didn't elect to stay at home. They couldn't get to school. They don't have a way to get there. So that is something that they're looking at right now, and coming up with some scenarios, because that may entail, I guess, dealing with our leadership, the school leaders, teachers, because if I'm missing school, what do we do to help this kid and not have it count against them,
Right.
even though they were never suspended from school, but it was suspension from the bus. Okay. So it is something that they are working on right now.
And I don't know, I know we did this before, as far as not Akron specifically. Well, yeah, it was Akron, my son went to, so he had a chronic illness. And so he had instruction at home.
Yes.
When he was in a crisis. He had instruction at home, or he's in the hospital. Do those hours count in a case of discipline? Is it feasible to give them work? And if they turn the work in, then they have hours.
So yes, and I heard Ms. Carter and probably Dr. Robinson getting ready to speak to this too. And so in a case where a student is on homebound instruction or home instruction, that kind of thing, like that's already inherent in you being on home instruction. You have that home instructor. That's kind of the go-between between school and you, and ensuring your assignments, and that's coded a different way. Okay. Because you've gone through the process for that. If you are, and there's no discipline impact as a result of that. If you have a situation, a medical condition for which you are absent due to medical reasons, then that's where we work with the school nurse to make sure we have that information. You've got your doctor's excuses or whatever the case may be. There's no discipline behind that. Does that answer?
Yeah, I was just using that concept, not,
got it.
not
Okay.
the, just when kids are at home,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, is there a way to get them hours? And I guess you guys will figure it out, but that's just a concern that, you'd have to address the discipline, you have to address instruction, and you have to address absence. And And are we penalized for absence? How are we, I should know that, but.
Oh, no, we receive a school rating. So your school rating, you get a grade for attendance.
Yes, it's in the gap closing measure on the state report card. And I will just take a little quick second to say for the last few years, we have gained all of our points. We get 5 points for meeting the chronic absenteeism improvement indicator. So each year we are to drop our chronic absenteeism by 1.1 percentage points. And for the last couple years we have. So we've gotten our 5 points.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Jackson?
And just, I think, as a point of clarification, and you guys can chime in, we do have a policy regarding even when students are under discipline, as far as being able to make up their work, like to do the work. And so because I felt like that was more of what your question, like if a student is out, for instance, because of discipline, can they still make up work? So the answer is yes, they can. We have a policy that does support that, and it's within the constraints of how the class is structured. Like they have, depending on how many days they missed or why they missed the work, they have a certain allotted time to get with that teacher and to make sure that they turn in those assignments. So we do have policies to support that if students are out for discipline. And the only reason I want to address the part if they are out for discipline or some form, which I think getting kicked off the bus would align for discipline, but when they're missing school, I think when I process this, and we have footage of our buses, so we can see what a child has done on the bus. Mm-hmm. And I would say, and I know everyone feels different about these things, but in some cases, they should be just suspended. It is not, because now your actions, all these people are trying to delineate, especially on the older kids, like middle, trying to delineate how to figure out to get this child who made a decision to violate a rule to get put off the bus, which can be supported or not, because sometimes it may not be legit and they shouldn't even be suspended off the bus. And again, we have video footage. But oftentimes you have students fighting on the bus, a violation of our code of conduct, jumping kids on the bus, cussing out, threatening bus drivers. And I'm saying this from a firsthand perspective because I serve as an administrator of a school and some of my kids' bus. And they have infractions, and then some may get, it seems like a slap on the wrist because they get put off the bus, and then people are trying to figure out how to get you to school. And so, not trying to show a lack of compassion about that, but just like if they're out on suspension, they can make up that work. When you make certain decisions, in some of these instances, it's habitual, where the bus driver, because they have to get transported to school, but it becomes an habitual strain where it is some serious things that have happened on school buses, like serious, and especially when you're doing with the different grades, even within our district. And so I just want to put that out there as we're considering, okay, what do we do? How do we close gaps when we're trying to cater to figuring out how to get some of these kids that are in egregious violations in some cases, and in other cases, this child shouldn't have been put off the bus. This bus driver being a little extra. But we can verify these things because we have access to the footage on the buses. I only want to bring that up because I think a lot of times when we make it more convenient, it gives no motivation for family and child to deal with the behavior of the fact that they're being transported and its consequences for actions. Mm-hmm. A lot of things have happened to where parents have had to pull their kids off the bus. Parents who really can't afford to, and figure out how their kid gonna get to school because situations are not being mitigated properly because you got kids on the bus that feel like they'll cuss a bus driver out, throw something at the bus driver, fight, jump a kid on the bus, and all these, you see? So I want to just put that out there as we're going through these processes and what to do, and if this happens, then what? Because it's like we're appeasing a behavior and not considering the whole metric. Not saying I want kids kicked out of school, but again, consistency and expectation. You set an expectation when if our code of conduct says you cannot threat, you can't hit somebody with a lock, you can't hit somebody with your shoe upside their head while they're sitting on the bus, and then be back in school, then how can you do it on a bus but can go back into a school building? when it's in transport to the same organization. It's not like the Metro public bus, but you're doing this in transport to or from school. So I just wanted to put that like factual background information about when kids are getting put off the bus, and also with the caveat that I do understand in some cases and things that I've seen, I'm in disagreement. The child shouldn't have been put off the bus, and it's an issue with the driver. But these are all things that if we're doing due diligence and due process, we can delineate from, and those are different, situations, so.
Yes, I'm glad Mr. Jackson brought up the piece as far as being able to make up their work, because I know it is a policy, and Reverend Harrison, that kids, if they're suspended from school, there's a way they can get their work and get it made up and get it back to their teachers so that they can still get their work in. They may have missed the days, but they can get their work completed.
And I guess I was speaking to the hours. Does the makeup work go to the hours that we need as
It does not count for attendance,
Yeah.
but it
They have
does
to-
count for work.
Yeah, they have to
Yeah.
be in those seats.
Yes.
So the gap closing that we were talking about for the annual yearly progress, that's part of the things to show progress is butts and seats, students at school. And the other problem, though, that comes with this, because I think this is a very good question to really unpack and understand, is because some administrators and teachers find themselves in a very peculiar situation, because annual yearly progress says we need students in seats, we need that attendance. And so then sometimes teachers have asserted that some kids that should be out of the building, like legitimate case, should be out on suspension, possibly are not getting the disciplinary infractions they should because of certain metrics, like the bodies in the seats, because that weighs heavily. Now, this is assertions. I haven't done any deep dive research with this, but in education, this is some of the conversations about, because it's tied up in our metrics for school improvement.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to do the merits of should they be suspended or should they not. I guess I'm just looking at it from a policy place. If this happens, are we shooting ourselves? And we need them. We need them. We need the discipline in place. We need the attendance in place, and we need the instruction. So for me, I know the kids do what they do, and that's why we got you. So just from a perspective of ours, how do we keep ourselves on track and not have truancies in those situations?
Yes. We love meeting the standard, and so we keep our eyes on that as well, Pastor Harrison.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Jackson?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna let this go after this, but I promise. But but Member Harrison asked a good point about truancy. How do we keep ourselves on track? And I know that Dr. Lash knows and can speak to this because we did a presentation before a year ago about our truancy officers, about the things that we were having in place where people were going to engage and trying to see what was going on. We talked a little bit about our transient population and how we were working with Project Rise with things. So these are some, because when you ask what are we doing, I just want to highlight the things that we have in place, because like what we are doing and what we're doing is with the truancy officers that we had going out. I don't know if that's still in practice. Also, I know Project Rise was making some strides to make sure that families have what they needed so that they can arrive to school. So we do have some wraparound services that assist us as well with our truancy. So just...
Right. This is a good conversation to have, but I would say also that I'm sure that the district is probably policing all these different aspects, because you're going to police the discipline, police bus, police in seats in school, police the work getting taken care of. So it's a lot of things that are going on, but have to be policed to make sure that we can meet all the standards we need. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Lash.
That is it.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Carter, back
Thank
to
you,
you.
Dr. Lash.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Keith Lichty come up. We have some policies that we're required to review, as it relates to school improvement. And Keith, if you could just talk us through the school improvement piece.
Yes, and I do want to call out, I did find one typo on our school improvement policy 2120. I have in your documentation that it was last reviewed June 9th, 2023. It was actually last revised June 9th, 2003. But what I've brought before you are the 7 policies that we have that are related to federal funds. And our last feedback from our federal review, or actually in preparation for our federal review, the Department of Education and Workforce is asking us now to revise our federal policies every 3 years. And so what I've kind of learned in the last couple of years in this position is normally we wait for Neola to push out some recommended updates, and that's not happened. And so these policies have been left like unrevised or unupdated for quite some years. So to be compliant and to have a successful review in March, we would like to have this process started for these 7 policies to at least be reviewed. We started working with other departments back in October and November, and we actually found that the policies are still good. We didn't feel like we needed any additional edits. However, you can see from the chart, most of them, you know, haven't been reviewed for quite some time. So the ask really for 6 of our policies, the only one, policy 6325, procurement, Deb Folk has been working on that, and I think she has some changes in the works, but that one wasn't a concern for me for our federal review because it was last revised 2023. And so if you wanted to go through each one, we can, but we weren't recommending any changes because they're all tied back to ESSA and federal regulations, and they're pretty straightforward, you know, cut and dry, what we have to have in place per federal guidelines around receiving federal dollars. So things like, you know, we'll have a parent involvement plan, we'll have a school improvement process that, well, let me stop there and see. I'm new to this, so thanks for having me to the policy committee. So I don't know, do you want to review each one? Again, we're not looking for changes, but we're looking for the board to be able to review these and get an updated date that they are in good standing and meeting the regulations.
Yeah. If they're meeting the regulation and we are doing what we're supposed to, I don't think we need to go through each one of them. It would be a waste of all of our time. Actually, not a waste of our time, but a time that we could use to get out of here on
Yes.
time.
And you can see from the chart, we did meet with all of the departments and the folks that directly relate to this work since October. And then our next round will be to work on the administrative guidelines. And there might be some more work around the administrative guidelines. Yeah, thank you. The policy is pretty
Any
straightforward.
questions before Mr. Lickey leaves the podium? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Lickey.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lickey. All right, next we'll have Todd Wamis to discuss the nepotism policy.
Good evening. I know last committee meeting reviewed a draft. We have an updated draft. Took some of the feedback that you had provided with regards to from the last meeting as well to address that, and kind of just reformatted the style of our policy. But starting off often what we'll do with some of our policies with the definitions of who we're referring to as family members, the employment considerations that would be of value that we need to make sure that we're taking into consideration for the policy. And one of the items under with regards to came up last time was with regards to the reporting structure and making sure that we're looking at, especially where we have, if you look down in the section under avoiding favoritism and conflicts of interest, under supervision and reporting structure, that if, the third bullet there, if a family member leads a division or department, at least 2 levels of reporting structure must exist between the family member and the relative. So it's giving some more separation that if I have a family member who is employed but not directly reporting to me, but their supervisor reports to me, it could potentially cause a concern in that regard, because then I'm evaluating that supervisor of my family member. So it's adding some extra separation in there as well. But So this is the draft we put together, yet this is not a first read, correct? This is
No,
just a
but we would
draft.
be asking for it to move to a first read for the next meeting. And then we, unless you see something in here else that needs to be added. So we added that third bullet was added, and what else was added? I forgot. Anyway, we added a couple more things to what we currently had, and like he said, it's been restructured. I think it reads better than the way it used to look. But we think it's ready to move to the first read, but we want to discuss that with the committee.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? My personal thought is I think we could move it to the first reading, and if there is something that we need to, anyone finds in here that we may need to change or we want to discuss, we can bring it to the next meeting, and that way we can get it done at the next meeting so we can have it ready before we bring it to the third reading at the board regular meeting. Is it okay with everybody who's here? I want to make sure we're okay. Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wamas.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Next, for new business, there are some Neola updates, and I'll hand it over to Attorney Haley.
Hi, Haley Kepcher with Retzel and Andrus. So we received our Neola update for January at the end of last month. For those of you that do not know, Neola is a company that the district uses and many school districts use to provide policy development services. They help us to maintain compliance with federal and state law. So in this update, we have there are 6 legal alerts in 26 policies that are updated. So we will continue to work with administration internally to determine which policies will be prioritized to bring forward at our next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Haley. And that concludes our agenda, unless anybody had anything else for new business.
Anything for new business? Nothing. Okay, we'll move forward.
Okay, that was it. And so at our next board meeting, it'll be our third and final read for the dress and grooming and then for the uniform repeal.
Did we do uniform last meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So that was,
And it's actually been on the board agenda for the second read, and then
second
now
read. Okay.
it's going to be the
Got it,
third
got
and
it, got it.
final read for this
Okay,
next board
perfect.
meeting.
All right. Any questions on that? Ms. Autry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate that the policy is not attached, but I wanted to ask, in terms of the dress code, what I hear most from community members are complaints that it's not being enforced. And
Okay.
are there any provisions in the policy that we can somehow provide? Because I get that a lot.
Right, I think that would go to the code. Did you want to talk to that, or you want Dr. Lash to come up?
Good afternoon, evening. Yes, they're in the code of the student code of behavior. There is a conduct code item for dress code. So there is, the way has been made, if you will, to discipline. I think it's a 100 level code. I was just up in a code meeting. It's a 100 level code. But I think your question was more about the enforcement of it. So the code is there to be used, but are we using it? And I think, Dr. Robinson, that's what you were going to respond to.
Yeah. So we started off, I'm saying we as a district started off, I feel like, really, really well enforcing this. And as time has progressed, I'm seeing where, and I've been monitoring it and talking with the executive directors for school leadership, especially when I get concerns from parents, even students, have voiced in terms of some of the things that they see in their school. And so that's been being addressed with their principals, because that has to be the person who's enforcing it. I can't enforce it from here, but I can enforce the fact that if the principal is not enforcing it, and we can address that with the principal to put provisions in place to make sure that they are doing that. But that has to be something that we need the help of every teacher and every administrator in that building, every adult, even the custodians, it doesn't matter, to say, hey, you know that you can't wear this or you can't do that, you know. But that's where the issue comes in. Started off very well, and you see in certain instances where it has gone to the wayside, and we have to go back in and reinforce again, and then they'll get back on it, and then they'll, you know. But that has to be they have to have consistency in following it. Because if not, then yes, when you go into given day in any particular school, not just one or two, they might be wearing things that they shouldn't, and that has again be what is enforced through the building leadership. But we do need the help of every adult in that building to encourage kids to, you know, do what they're supposed to do. They can tie things to PBIS, rewarding kids who, you know, are doing the great things, and those that are not, then that's why you're not being rewarded, right? But that again has to be with the principal of those schools. And so when I get concerns, hear them, whether it's from students or from community people, I'm in the grocery store sometimes, and I'll hear people say, you know, those kids are not, and I say, absolutely, you're probably correct. And, you know, I find out which school, and then I'll reach out to the supervisor to address that with the principal. But we do need to do a better job collectively with the enforcement and the consistency of enforcing it.
And I think it's a like you said, it's a village, right? So it's a home school connection piece. And so I think we have to continuously reiterate this with our families as relates to, we need your help too to communicate the same message, and we need you to be on the same page that we're on, so that the student knows that we're all in this together to see them to be successful.
And we have, help me, Dr. Lash, is it 3 or how many correspondence have we sent? I sent a few since the summer.
The dress code, yeah.
Up until
maybe 3.
December. It was either 2 or 3. I mean, we've been sending mail outs and pushing things out, reminding parents of what they can and cannot wear. In the summer packet, all of that information was in there. So again, we started off strong. And then depending upon which leader and which school, we saw it dying off. We started pushing a little more, you know, then because we actually had some parents, and thank goodness for our parents that brought it to my attention and say, hey, I'm making sure my child, and I appreciate that, because that's what we need. We need more. We need it to be more of a community enforcement, you know, to say if it's the lady on the grandmom on the street, hey, I see you wearing, you're not supposed to be wearing that going to school, right? But we need the help of everybody to enforce it. But again, it's the consistency of the enforcement that I've been working with the directors on with their leaders.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted it to be said out loud, because I do get it a lot. And I let them know that there is an existing policy. As a board member, I can't enforce it. I've even suggested that could potentially be the work of your parent groups, some type of volunteer committee to help, you know, with that. So I'm just saying it again, and just asking parents to support their building leadership in those areas.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay. Ms. Jackson, President Jackson, I'm sorry.
I'm Ms. Jackson. Hey, Carla, you know I go. All right, so very quickly to your point, and I was saying as Ms. Carter was talking, everything that everyone says we know, practically it sounds good, right? We talk about village commitment, parents, but we have a lot of children in our district that are parenting themselves and their younger siblings. The parents are not buying nor controlling what they wear, although we have a population that are. And so I think the best practices and good practices is what the superintendent has spoke to from a district level. When we talk about high level trickling down, the notices, the newsletters, the information, the summer packet, all that stuff. But we cannot control anything that a parent does or doesn't
That's
do.
true.
We can control our response and what our policy speaks to and enforcing our policy. as I'm on my fourth last year of this board, I came into this with parents. I have not forgot the parents who, in authenticity, sat up here at this podium becoming emotional, and it wasn't fake. They wasn't trying to push an agenda. There were some authentic people that came talking about school violence and what it was doing to their child, how their child felt, cell phones, right, all this. It blew my mind that we had an existing cell phone policy. It blew my mind that when I went to certain teachers' classroom, the students already knew what time it was, and they was putting their phones with no hesitation, not cussing the teacher out, in a basket. But then I had another teacher, very professional, someone I respect, phenomenal educator at East High School, a history teacher, Miss Treen, who said to me, and I've said this before on the mic, she said, have you ever had a child, somebody cuss you out when you ask them for their phone? I said, oh, no, because I put kids out. But I'm in a different position, because the expectation, when you have a certain expectation, children rise to the expectation. But what you expect, you inspect and you enforce, right? So I think really when we're talking about building leadership, because now we're talking about school culture and climate. Because there are some schools in our district, bonnets are regular. Kids walk past you with bonnets, and you see administrators walk past them, they don't say nothing. Then you have some schools, you don't see one bonnet. You have other schools where they're in full pajamas with flip-flops, and we're supposed to be grooming them, the expectation that we're preparing you for some type of level of professionalism, whatever that is, we know it's not pajamas, unless that's your brand and you're doing an infomercial. I'm saying, right? So it really is the building and like the the superintendent already said, and teachers, but I never forget when Ms. Treen said that to me, because if a teacher is not empowered in the fact that if they stand on policy and there's not an action step that happens when they're standing on policy and telling the child, we don't wear pajamas to school. Now, we have resource closet, clothes, things that we can provide for students, so we don't have to get into the social economic, every child doesn't have clothing, because we have United. We have a lot of community partners, organizations, and even some parent groups that will provide these things for these children. So again, I just want to stress the fact of accountability and expectation. Because what I feel is that in some of our schools, it's a lower expectation. And so some students might walk past and it may be, now this is my assumption, you see, that it may be the thought, well, they don't know better or they don't have. But I look at them and see, because I'm from their community, you have on red bottoms, you have on Christian Louboutin shoes. You wearing that bonnet, and those bundles are like $600 bundles. So it's not that you don't have. I'm going to give you the expectation from me. Take off the bonnet and your hair cute, girl. And then we keep moving. And it's we have to really get to honing in to making sure everyone is empowered that, well, what is the action step if a teacher does say something to the child and the child flip out on the teacher and then it's back in that teacher's classroom? I know I might get a lot of flack for my comments I'm making today, but this is the reality, and people need to be real with stuff. Because all this coochie-coo and making everything is an excuse for everything and every action these children do without any consequences in the real world, and understanding you can't come here and just be any kind of way. Because I'm telling you, if you go through all our buildings, and I don't want to call them out, it's not the same. Kids ain't wearing bonnets and flip-flops at some of these buildings. It goes there, it's a profession, the standard is here and you can see it. And then you go into others, and it's like they don't expect you to do anything different. You got the little twist rollers in here. So I just want to talk about building culture and climate and what that looks like. So as y'all unpacking, yeah, we want a whole village, and yeah, we want to tell administrators and we want teachers to feel empowered. But I know in a lot of cases, teachers have stated to me when I'm in buildings that when they say the littlest things to students, or students do certain things, they end up right back in their classroom. So what is that speaking to as far as what we think about our policies and what we really want to enforce? So that's one of the considerations that I want us to be very real about. Because yes, we have the policies. We had a cell phone policy too, and then spent thousands of dollars on yonder bags. And it wasn't a new policy. It's been in existence, but it was not being enforced, so it was pointless. And so we need to be very intentional at what is the process / consequence, and are we consistently doing that when these things are happening? And I'm just going to leave it at there. Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else before I say anything? Pastor Harris?
I agree with you, but I think the policies are the policies. And for me, the enforcement is the districts, because there should be a standard across the district. And I think a good policy is a good policy. And then, not to pass the buck, but I think that's what we do, is we create good policies and hold people accountable to the policies. And that's the tough part for me. Again, we go back to the attendance. We want kids in the classroom. We need them in the classroom, but we need them in the classroom doing the right thing. And how do you make that happen? But if I'm a teacher and 6 teachers, this is me. This is not speaking to the policy, but if I'm one teacher and 6 teachers are letting something happen, then where am I at in saying no? So I think it is parents. I think it still has to be the village. But why do we allow this in this school and something else in a different school? So is it the building, or is it the administration? Is it the policy, or is it everything? And I think it's everything.
Yes, Ms. Jackson.
The policies are sound. The cell phone policy, solid policy. It was not enforced. And when I am telling you this from a front row seat. Not from theoretical knowledge, what I think. I'm talking about what I see play out in real life as an educator for 20 years. Is if the parent has no involvement, most kids spend more time in the school building than they do with their parents. And whether people want to believe and get with that or not. Some teachers spend more time and have more knowledge. And I'm not saying this is right. This is the society, the culture, and climate we're in. And it's not always because parents are bad, but you got some parents working jobs, doing swing shift. They got the older kids dropping it off. They living, right? And so that's why you have some excellent teachers in the district that can speak to real issues of what's happening with kids. Now, the reason why I say policy is sound, because I looked over, I remember the cell phone one. I'm like, this is a good policy. And if it's one teacher that's doing the right thing, so teacher, we're going to say we're empowering students, but because 5 of your colleagues are piss poor, you're going to be piss poor? Because excellence looks different. So I'm telling you, like breeds like, and what you feed is what grow. I tell you, the high-performing teachers, in a circle, I bet you the other teachers are high-performing. I bet you those are the teachers, like when I went over to Sam Salem, that's showing when they're trying to show the life process, they got eggs growing in these things and trying to show how the egg become a chicken because they're doing life applications for the kids to see how excellence looks different. You can't bootleg that. So the point is, administration has to be consistent with the enforcement, because if the teachers get burned out, the stress comes in when I am an excellent teacher. I can mitigate and manage discipline from my classroom. But when I'm trying to have a cultural and make sure I enforce it throughout the building, so I see this person who's not necessarily my class, because I may teach 10th grade history, and I tell you, you shouldn't have those pajamas on, and you say something slick, and I report it to the administrator, and that same kid is back walking down the hall the next day, that's the problem. And so I think at the end of the day, then, what is the teacher's then recourse? This is where that empowerment has to come in, like, hey, I report this to the administrator, and this kid is back in school. I don't care if everybody else on this right side of this hallway do whatever, because I'm excellent. Excellence looks different, and they know what Mr. Harrison, Mr. Alexander's, Miss Autry's expectations is. That's why I can give you the example of the teacher. And if teachers watching this, they know what I'm talking about. He was a male. They put it in a basket before yonder bags. And when our urban school, they dropped it, they had no problem, they said nothing. When they left out, they picked up their phones. He was able to do it because the standard never was lowered. And it was a level of mutual trust and respect. I'm not talking to you crazy, but come on, I need y'all to do this. Relationship building, right? Humanity, understanding the students aren't beneath you, but relationally, we understand as educators, teachers, students will not learn from people they believe don't like them, nor respect them. It's a block there. So it's those dynamics. So I know people want to say parents, and that would be, in a perfect world, that would be great. But I'm saying when your reality is, I am my parent, that's why when you try to talk to me like I'm a child in a parent voice, when I am the parent, when I'm paying light bills, when I'm getting my siblings up and dropping them off, this is not stuff I'm making up in my head. Like, I'm talking about a specific student at Bookdo right now. When this is your reality, and this teacher coming and talking to me, girl, I ain't got. But
Right,
how
and
do we curb that?
Absolutely. And I think everybody is correct. And I think there's just layers. And I think parents do play a part when they are apart. And when they are apart, we need them to play their part.
Right.
And so there's layers to it from pre-K all the way up to high school as it relates to how we make sure that we're enforcing our expectations and our school rules and making sure that we're doing our PBIS and being consistent. Because I do believe consistency breeds compliance. But it's going to take everyone in the building to be on the same page. Because I may act right in your classroom, but I know I don't have to in your classroom. So it's going to take everybody to make sure that we're doing what we need to do so that the child can be successful. Because they know who they can do what with when they're in the different classrooms. So this was a wonderful, wonderful discussion.
It is a good discussion, and I'm not going to say anything.
Thank you, Ms. Audrey.
Been said. Any other questions we have for those who are here to answer questions for us in administration? Nothing once, nothing twice. Okay, well, hey, thanks to everyone who's watching. Thanks for those who are here. Thanks everyone who attended the meeting, my fellow board members and others. And we will see you at our next meeting. Thank you and have a good evening.